Happens when a director cannot stand the genre they're working in and also despises their own audience. You get a movie like Funny Games from Michael Haneke, which we got 2 versions of, one in 1997 and one in 2007. Now, I have the Austrian version and the US version at 5 stars. I prefer the US version. I think the performances are just straight up better, especially Michael Pitt, Brady Corbet, and Naomi Watts. If you haven't seen these, I'm going to totally spoil it, so if you want to watch them, favorite this and then come back later. Now, on the surface, this is very straightforward. It's a torturous, slow burn of a home invasion. Setup here sort of reminds me of another European movie with 2 versions, that is Speak No Evil. Starts with Peter, played by Brady Corbet, stopping by this beautiful lake house to ask for some eggs. A rising passive aggression that permeates that conversation. There's kind of this rising sinister nature buried under the surface. Things quickly begin to escalate, and these 2 young men reveal themselves to be absolutely unhinged. The thing with Funny Games is it has no intention of being the lazy and exploitative movie that you expected and want it to be. The funny things about this movie is this family is purposefully nothing. We have Anne, we have George, and we have Georgie. These are non-characters. There's kind of this nondescript, boring, faceless family that could be anyone. You do not really have character traits. There's nothing interesting about these people. There's nothing memorable, and again, that is very much the point. And what you get throughout the course of Funny Games is mostly psychological terror being unleashed onto this family. The thing with Haneke is everything he does in this film is to hold up essentially a middle finger to the audience, saying, quote, I don't like violence and I don't like horror movies. I would never do a thriller or horror film for the sake of doing it, and I would say Funny Games is a self-reflexive anti-horror film. It's a criticism of violence because that makes me really angry. He's asking in both of these films, which are essentially carbon copies of each other, why do you want to see any of this? Rather hilariously, he said when he made the first movie, anyone that walks out of this while it's playing does not need the movie. They understand. Anyone who watches it to the end does need the film. He does not care about your feelings, does not care about any single rule around the genre. The family has a dog who you might expect to survive. The dog is beaten with a golf club, and then they play essentially a game of hot and cold to track down the carcass. The other thing you might expect here is that Georgie will make it out. Being the kid, he is safe here, right? That is not the case. This is a hopeless, bleak, and quote-unquote boring movie where there's not really much to quote-unquote spice up what's happening. You know that the perpetrators are dragging this out for absolutely no reason, and they make a joke about it because this movie is self-aware and it does break the 4th wall. You have essentially 2 Clockwork Orange-inspired NPCs with no obvious backstory, no real motivations, just generally villainous people terrorizing this family that, again, have no specific characterization as well. You get the feeling that these 2 do this in this world simply because they have nothing else to do. This is their job. The movie is pointless, essentially. It is hopeless, and it drives that hopelessness home with one of the best scenes in the film. We get a moment where Anne is able to grab their shotgun and eliminate Peter. The hilariously obvious moment you might expect in a movie like this for the hero or heroine to be able to get away. What Paul does is he grabs the remote in this world and literally rewinds the movie. Peter is then saved, and Anne will then be pushed into the lake as they have a nonchalant, ridiculous conversation about nothing. At the end of the film, we know these guys are just going to go do this all over again. Before the scene with the movie being rewound, we get one of the most upsetting scenes in the movie, and that is the death of Georgie. This happens off camera, as does a lot of the violence in this movie, because he's essentially saying, fuck you, I'm not going to show you what you want to see. In the aftermath, we get this long shot of this NASCAR race where the volume is turned up to the max. It's just constantly droning, and it's this repetitive thing over and over again. With this, you get the feeling of how Haneke feels, with our entertainment literally being blood-soaked, repetitive, and boring. In the end, this is sort of a movie that does what Oliver Stone thought he was doing with Natural Born Killers. It's willing to look at the audience, to laugh at us, to ask, is this what you wanted, and more importantly, why?